All right. Chapters 1 and 2 are just so good. I feel like reading them over again to just soak in on the poeticism and in the philosophical inquiry. So, just to set the stage again, where we're at, folks have said that we are creating our own worldview here. The author, teacher, Kohelet, has invited us to be part of the inquiry and the questioning, to engage. We don't know if we're going to agree with the teacher or we're going to disagree with the teacher, but we're going to read through it and come to our own conclusions. So we read in verse 24 is where we left off. There is nothing better for mortals than to eat and drink and then find enjoyment in their toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he gives the work of gathering and heaping only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a chasing after wind. So, two themes here. The first is one we're going to see repeated throughout all of the chapters of Ecclesiastes. This idea that this quest for pleasure or enjoyment or fulfillment, it's all vanity. And so, the best we can do rather than find ultimate fulfillment is to be in the moment, to enjoy the work of our hands on any given day. Does that resonate for anyone? I'm just curious because that's going to be one of the major takeaways of Ecclesiastes. Yeah, Cynthia, why does that resonate for you?
Living in the moment, the only thing we have is the moment.
All right. So Cynthia says in her investigations of Buddhism, the idea of living in the moment, there's nothing that you can control. We talked about that last week, the idea of trying to control our circumstances. There's nothing we can control if we're so caught up in thinking, oh, I want to be a famous writer, Cynthia says, or I'm so upset at what I've done in the past. But in this moment is the what we have. All right. Other responses to that? Does it resonate? Does it trouble? Yeah, Donna? Yeah, we're going to get to that. Do we believe that? Yeah. Remember, as we read this, we talked about the last 2 weeks. Are we taking a hermeneutic of suspicion or a hermeneutic of trust? We don't have to agree with what the teacher's conclusions are. So we're going to get to that verse in just a moment. But I want to see if there's any other thoughts on the idea of there's nothing better for mortals than to eat and drink and find enjoyment in their toil. Eat, drink, and be merry. Cheers. Yeah, Brian.
I'm thinking about how disillusioned I am with capitalism. The thing we have to do is go to work every day, make a lot of money just so that we could live in this area, just to go to sleep and go to work the next day so we can make a lot of money so we can live in this area. And around and around and around it goes. There's nothing better for mortals than to eat and drink and find enjoyment in their toil. I'm not enjoying that toil. It just goes around and around and around. It feels like a hamster.
Yeah. This is what the author was saying in chapter 1, just looking at nature. The sun rises and sets and goes back to the beginning. This cycle, it seems like we can't escape it. And so the idea of eat, drink, and find enjoyment in the toil. What if we're not finding enjoyment in the toil or in the cycle? And in this area, you have to work so hard to make enough money to pay your rent so that you can go to bed in a house and get up and keep working to pay for that bed that you're sleeping in.
But I would agree with if we can expand the definition of toil to sort of mental or greater things that people are accomplishing, satisfaction of service or helping other people or things like that. Otherwise, it just seems to be lost.
Okay, so Melissa wants us to expand our idea of toil. It's not just what we do to pay the bills, but it can be our service to the world, our hobbies, our everyday activities, so our actions. How do we find enjoyment in our actions? Yeah, Diane.
One thought is toil. Satisfaction. it's hard to do.
All right.
You can make that choice.
Okay.
Find something. It's not easy.
Okay. Thanks. Diane's saying, all right, we're going to take this at face value. If you're not enjoying the toil, then change the toil. Real life example, Hugh, late 30s, going back to grad school, finding a career that he actually enjoyed. It's not easy, but something that might be important. Shirley?
It does say it's from the hand of God, apart from him, who can have enjoyment. So maybe it's about somehow in the midst of toil or whatever else we're doing, we have to keep looking for God in it and resetting our mind to be somehow, what am I doing to make this a better place?
Okay, all right. So verse 25, we can't divorce the enjoyment from the spirituality, from the connection to God. That enjoyment itself is from the hand of God. And so it's not just our own doing, our own work, or our own meaning making. We have to create the meaning in conjunction with the divine. Lisa?
Just to, I would say that, yeah, I agree with what Shirley said, because I'm reading it and going, like, so apart from him, who could even have enjoyment? And I always think of, like, if all you're doing is doing this, these or just circle, you're right. But it's like, and I always think that, like, it's futile. It's like if you're looking for something outside of yourself to make you happy, joyful, content, it's just, it's futile, I think. And I've seen that, even whether I think you believe in God or not, I mean, there's got to be a bigger purpose. So I love that sprinkle stuff, meaning and purpose, you know, search for, like, master for meaning. So I look at that for us as a Christian, I'm like, what's my nature role to, like, serve God and serve others? And so out of that, it's not just about, like, what can I do to consume for myself, but what can I do to serve God, help others, and then hopefully that I get there's a contentment in all those things that I do.
Mm-hmm. Wow, thanks. Beautiful. So Lisa, tying in what Shirley just said, referencing Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, that our meaning making or our search for purpose, for Lisa, it has to be tied to our understanding of the divine, that there's some greater purpose, that when we are part of serving what God is doing in the world, then that provides contentment. Otherwise, it does feel futile. Yeah, Deanna.
That just made me think of this great quote from the Gilded Age. Heard that is talking to her daughter about happiness and what she's saying about happiness and gold rather than the end of the week. For me, for my client, she says happiness is a byproduct of the wealth of your life class as a goal.
Okay, interesting. So, quotation from, this is a TV show, right? The Gilded Age, yeah. Happiness as a byproduct of a well-ordered life, but as an end result, it's doomed to failure. So, this is a philosophical text, and that just makes me think of so many philosophers, Marcus Aurelius, and a lot of the Greeks and Romans, this idea of what a well-ordered life even looks like. All right, other thoughts, Kevin?
Well, that's a question. It starts my here. The word mortals, right? Like, I wonder, is there something going on? That's something about all of us.
So Kevin's question is, mortals seems to be not necessarily a word used a lot. What's the Hebrew? All right, let's get to it. It's just Adam, the original human, the earth, the ground.
Seems like the word that cartoon bad guys said.
Very cartoonish, you foolish mortals. All right, well, let's get to verse 20. Well, no resolution there. Thank you. These are all great responses and great thoughts. I mentioned when we started that this is one of my favorite books, only because it was very meaningful to me in the midst of my freshman year of college and my existential dread of thinking that I was a failure at life and what am I going to do? And to just say, okay, I'm going to live in this moment. I'm going to enjoy this year and not knowing what's going to happen and just whatever I do with my work, I'm going to find pleasure in. So that can either be satisfying or not. But let's take up verse 26. This is part of the wisdom literature is trying to answer the question, just like the book of Job, is how does justice work? Does God's justice result in the righteous being rewarded and the sinful punished? And the wisdom literature is going to give us 10 different answers to this question. Thoughts? Is that the way justice works in your observation? Seen some no's? Yeah.
I think the chapter, the book of Job, will give us a very different.
Absolutely. Chris saying the book of Job would give us a very different answer. Yes.
It seems like something that one of Job's friends would say.
It seems like something that one of Job's friends would say. Yeah. So Job has 3, eventually 4 friends that insist that if he's suffering in this great way, he must have done something to sin against God. And Job insists on his innocence. Yeah, Shirley.
I want to try something different, which is if you think of sin as just being apart from God, which is one definition of sin, and those who are apart from God probably do feel, and I know I've felt this way, I'm doing all this and somebody else gets the glory or someone else gets the benefit. And so maybe when you're not feeling like you're part of God's plan, then yeah, you feel it.
Oh, wow. All right. So surely redeeming one way that we can read this in a way that resonates is if, to this Gilded Age quote, to what you're saying, Lisa, if we're finding meaning in life through the results of our labor and only through that, then there's going to be ways in which it will disappoint us. And so if we feel disconnected from God and we're finding all of our meaning in chasing after wealth in order to find satisfaction, then it's just going to feel like gathering and heaping and vanity and chasing. But the moment we're connected to God, that feels more like wisdom and knowledge and joy. So it's not necessarily a reward for being righteous and a punishment for sinning. I mean, we see plenty of people who have enough wealth not to have to gather and heap and chase. Seems like they're satisfied, but we're trying to figure out is that ultimate satisfaction. Lisa?
Interesting hearing that, like I'm thinking of the top 1.0%, like I don't know their spirituality, so I'm not gonna, but I'm like, how much wealth do you need in a lifetime?
Yeah.
Like, why do you need to have more? Like, that's what this verse tells me. It's like, really? $1 billion or $2 billion, like $1 zillion, what Dr. People says. Like, it's never enough. And so I have to amass more. And I'm like, this speaks to that to me. It's like, it never fills them. And then you have to put rockets into space.
Yeah.
So yeah, it struck me as
Okay. Brian, you already started our critique of capitalism, so when is it enough?
I'm gonna fight evangelicals.
You're going to fight the evangelicals and the billionaires. Okay.
This makes my mind think about evangelical megachurches. I've heard them called pyramid schemes recently, which I've been so enamored with. But if you're truly not pleasing God, then it's a constant struggle to gather and keep more people, more money, more branches of the church. I'm thinking of Life Church in Oklahoma, which is one of the biggest evangelical churches, 20 branches around the metro area. They have to continually gather and keep to keep that movement going.
Yeah.
And so are they truly in joy? If you ask them, they would say that they are. They're full of the knowledge and wisdom of God and living in joy. But are they just sinners
Okay, interesting. Brian making a parallel to evangelical megachurch culture. To keep the operation running
Yeah.
takes a constant amount of gathering and keeping to pay for all the moving parts.
Like our budget is $2 million, creeping on 3, and these churches, it's $100 million a year, just to keep the operation going. So they have to bring in new people all the time just to sustain the lights and flashing things,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the pastor's lifestyle.
Yeah. All right. Very interesting. Melissa?
Sort of harkens back to the God of the Garden of Eden. It's almost human and jealous. If he sees him, then he's gonna, do right by his friends, like a certain government we see right now.
Yeah.
And also just the whole idea that
Yeah, thanks. Melissa just saying,
oh,
absolutely.
Of course, it's different power structure. Like we're getting all the good stuff because we're good people. People all are good and bad.
Ooh. Yeah, your theology can influence your ethics. When you think that you are divinely installed, or your wealth is a result of being blessed by God, then it prevents you from taking a look at yourself and your system to see if it truly aligns with the values of God. Absolutely. Judith.
I'm thinking my evangelical daughter would say that they must spread out and they must get more churches. They must, or they're not fulfilling their goal to share the gift of the truth. They, only they know, if they don't go out to the suburbs and get some more.
Yeah.
And she would believe that deeply in her heart. She would totally reject the idea that
Yeah. So Judith saying that the answer would be to this idea of evangelical megachurches as a pyramid scheme, that the gospel of God is propelling them to spread to the suburbs or outwards, and it's not necessarily about the money. Interestingly, the earliest disciples were able to do that without tens of millions of dollar budgets somehow. Yeah, James?
Yeah, so I don't know if I would think that's misleading, but what I was thinking of was that this is about perspective in life, right? So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the bus meme, like where one person is sitting on one side of the bus, staring at the rock wall, the other person is sitting on the side by the window, and seeing everything. So the one looks center is the one looking at the rock wall with the window. All you see is the rock wall. The gathering of people, you don't really what oh, I gotta go through this. This person at the window is the one that's seeing that there is wisdom and knowledge the way to be through it somehow, that there is like in the everyday, there is something that we can take allow that.
Okay. All right. James saying this text is meant to help us develop perspective, and relating it to this meme of one person on the side of a bus looking at a rock wall. That would be you're looking at the heaping and the gathering as all there is, the toil of life, the vanity of it, but that there's another perspective. You're looking out the window and seeing there is knowledge and wisdom and joy to be gained, if only we'll see it or look through the right perspective. Well said. Donna?
when she's talking about the age, which is still playing, but it's the third season now, cool. But they're getting meaner and they're getting nastier. And you're supposed to see the power play, and there's nothing to do with when it being on top of when the staff of the people had money, the people are making money. It's very interesting. But also the righteous gemstones just slam, they just slam Christianity in general, but they also slam what people think people want to see in the way of a certain, because it's all show. It's just, it's very revelatory, because it is about vanity in the righteous gemstones. It's all about that.
All right, y'all have a lot of TV to watch. Gilded Age, Righteous Gemstones. All right. Oh, look at that. 30 minutes of discussion on 3 verses. Bible study's good. All right, let's get to our primo passage. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. All right, you've heard these words before. What have they meant to you? Do they mean something different as you hear them today? Lisa?
So it was interesting, I was, for some of the, I was on a 6.5 month strike with my employer, and there were some people who did come out at all. So right before, I mean, during this time, it was really hard. Like, it's like coming back to work, and I'm a steward. And I was like, I think I read this passage, and it felt like a time to love and a time to hate. I'm like, hate's a strong word for me, and I don't hate people, but I was like, I'm not going to give you the time of day for a little while, because I felt like it legitimized my feeling, because I was really struggling. Like, you didn't give us the day, and you got all the benefits that we got. And so when I got back to work, for me, this, not the passage, not, I know there's a lot, but I felt like, okay, I was validated a time. It's like a time, like looking in the eye and nodding now. So like, I feel like 2 months later, it's a little bit better, but it was hard. And I felt like this helped me.
Wow, wow, wow. Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. Lisa saying 6.5 month strike against her employer. And once the strike ended, new benefits in place for the folks who didn't even show up for a single day. Lisa saying just feeling like she couldn't get there at the beginning to even give them the time of day to read a passage like this and to say, okay, this is a season for distance. I think any therapist would encourage you to say, don't hide from your feelings or emotions. Give yourself the space to feel them for a season. Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for sharing that. Other thoughts on what these words mean?
There's sort of a sense of, well, yeah, we know that, but when?
Oh.
You go to what would Jesus do? I mean, kind of it's an old idea, but just thinking of Jesus's life, and there were times when he was angry, and there were times when he did put other people down, and he had to choose his moments, and we look to him. So that's a place to get some wisdom.
Okay, interesting. Shirley says, okay, yeah, I get that, but the hard part for me is when. How do you know when it's the right time for these things? That's the wisdom I hear. Judith and then Rick? Can you pick and choose? Okay. Okay, sure. Yeah, I personally have the same reaction to that. Like, oh my gosh, why should there ever be a time for war or hate? So is this true that we oscillate between this? Let's go over to Rick and then Cynthia.
The first word that came into my mind is Netanyahu, and then Russia, and just there's enough war that's happened in those areas that's a time for.
Okay. All right, Shirley's question is when? Well, Rick's saying it's enough. Thinking of this, Netanyahu, Putin, okay, all right, it's time for peace. We've had enough. Cynthia?
Well, not getting it. Not to kill people. But happened is world have war. But I don't know how to handle it.
Okay, okay. All
I
right.
think
Cyn-
that we overdo this. If your choices of worse you will, then, I mean, I don't think it.
Okay. Cynthia, complicating this idea of kill, saying the commandment against killing should be a commandment against murder, that sometimes for someone to eat meat requires killing, or what would you do in a situation where you're trying to put an end to Hitler and to fascism? Did it require war? Did it require murder? This is the great question that Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrestled with, and ultimately decided that despite his understanding that murder was wrong, that to be part of a plot to assassinate Hitler was necessary. So we were talking about ethics. There's a concept known as situational ethics. You can't have ethical edicts that apply to every circumstance at every time, but sometimes your ethics adapt or change to the situation you find yourself in. Okay? Yeah, Barbara?
It wasn't exactly that the birds suddenly were biblical scholars and I came up with this passage. But really throughout our history, there have been poets who have instructed with this. I mean, Pete Seeger changed that last verse. Instead of a time for war, he put, I swear it's not too late. So he changed it. But my note says the earliest poet was in the 1500s. And then you can go through to T.S. Eliot and so forth. What I think is interesting is there is an Israeli poet who challenged the teacher directly and denies that there's a time for it. They stop until you die. So we have been struggling with this passage ever since it's been written.
Mm-hmm. Barbara saying, the birds didn't come up with this. Pete Seeger changing the line to "it's not too late." When you get into source criticism, the idea is that the author of Ecclesiastes probably didn't write this passage either, but took the poem from something that came even earlier. But just the idea that we've been wrestling with this concept for a long time. Something we haven't quite touched on a little bit, just based on what Cynthia said. What I notice as I'm reading this is that there's no value judgment given to either extreme. It doesn't say there's a time to weep and a time to laugh, but laughing is better than weeping. It just says that both are true or both exist. So we're not told which is better than the other. Yeah, Bree?
I guess I put this in the context of what comes before.
Yeah.
To me, it sounds a little bit like emotion management.
Oh.
Right? Like we all have these extreme emotions, and the previous line about presence and being in the moment helps us manage those.
Wow, wow. Yeah. So Bree's saying, taking into the context of what comes before, that if we're trying to live in the moment, we have to navigate these extremes and realize as we go through these cycles that sometimes we're going to be at one end or the other, and we kind of have to manage them. Yeah, Robin.
I think as human beings, if we have what is morning.
Yeah.
So
Oh, interesting. How can you understand one concept without its opposite? How can you understand peace if not understanding that we're capable of war, good and evil?
The other thing is, I think sometimes religion takes some of this and gives you how much time. So how long do you mourn? How long do you?
Okay.
And not allowing each person to be individual.
Yeah. Not only when, but how long. And religion speaks to that.
And more in the past, but but I think we've learned that everybody's in a different place, and that's an improvement.
And learning that every person's in a different place, that this can be collective and it can be individual, that you come into contact with people who are in a time of mourning when you're in a time of dancing. And it seems to suggest that both can't be true simultaneously, but I think we've experienced them in tension or in the same moment. Melissa?
As I now this, go back to the human moment, and I keep focusing on the word and. That's where most of our life is lived.
Ooh.
And possibility of that moment of
Mm.
and.
Mm.
Going through it.
Okay, that was really profound. So Melissa's saying so much of our life is lived in the and do you mean by that that when we're, say this example, which is very relatable, when we're in the time of mourning, even understanding that there is an and, that it doesn't have to be that way forever? Is that what you mean?
I think that there is an and, maybe at the letter D, that you have a choice of what the and is.
Oh, okay. Melissa's saying that when you're living in this and you're getting to the D of and, you have a choice which direction you're going, what's next, what's possible, what the future holds. Yeah.
And I'd be curious, because it's not or.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's not.
Yeah. It's not or.
If that's true in the original text, but
Let's go to it. It would be true in Greek, but not Hebrew. So let's see. So this is the preposition, is adding that to the beginning of the word. Pointing out, and it's hard to say that it couldn't, but it hasn't been translated that way. What does it mean that it's not or? It's an and not an or. Speaking to the duality or the tension of living those simultaneously. Ben?
This passage in verse 4 makes me think of like the Puritans that lived such an austere lifestyle. Their church ended up becoming a congregational church that joined the UCC, and they didn't dance, and there's been all these splits over whether or not to dance. Did they even bother reading this verse?
So Ben, just thinking about the austerity of those pilgrims who established Congregationalism that eventually came the United Church of Christ, and all these debates about whether it's okay to dance. How did they not read this verse and so many other dancing verses? Yeah, good question. Robin?
I'm curious about what was included.
Ooh.
Are some of these really like it's lacking? Big, the opposite weeping, dancing, the opposite of one. Well, I guess they need like a time to keep and a time to go. You know, go see a time to go. Right here and here.
Yeah.
And the one that I time to grow the stones and time to damage stones. What's that?
Yeah. 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 Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Great question. So a couple thoughts here. So Robin just saying, what would a list that we create look like? I think that's a great thought experiment. And thinking of this one in particular, so you are not alone in being stumped on this. Scholars wonder what this actually means, and it could have several different meanings. So it could be agricultural, it could be sexual, a time to procreate and a time to not like casting seeds. Um,
Building a house, you might have a house, and if you work in the garden, you might find stove with like, that.
Okay, yeah, very literally gather stones to build a house or get rid of stones when you're trying to plant. Yeah, it could also just be a reference to a game. I mean, scholars don't know, so they're grasping at things like could be a game already in practice would have been the casting of stones as a way for divination. So good question, but a great thought experiment on what we would add. Yeah, Rick.
In verse 6, time to seek.
Uh-huh.
The word seek is, because when your grandparents and 3 high school age kids who were all involved in athletics.
Yeah.
They seek victory, seeking.
Oh, okay, interesting.
How they perform in the sports. When any organized sports, that's when.
Hmm. So Rick's wondering what this a time to seek and a time to gain or to lose. Hmm. Yeah. So it seems like the seeking can be both like actually searching for something or like a quest to survive, and the losing could be a destruction of something. So almost like a giving up, a time to, I don't know. Yeah. We could dig deeper into that. All right. Well, thanks for Beery for tying it into what comes before. And just to read one more verse, what gain have the workers from their toil? I have seen the busyness that God has given to everyone to be busy with. So what we're going to dig into is, again, that sort of cycle of our own lives, that the sun rises and sets and goes back to the beginning. Are these emotions and extremes that we experience just part of that same cycle? We go through mourning and joy and mourning and joy, and we oscillate between them, but it's just kind of futile because you're going to go from one to the other. Or is there a way to make some sort of meaning out of it? And that's what we'll continue to explore next week. Any concluding thoughts or comments? All right, thanks for the rich discussion today. Let me just close this with a word of prayer. God, thank you so much for the ways in which your scripture really is an invitation to dig deeper, to ask questions, to find meaning, to find purpose, to not be content with easy answers, but to be able to bring our real lived life experience with all of our mourning and dancing into this moment of seeking you and seeking some sort of purpose and contentment with what we have been given with the work of our hands. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen.